Welcome to One-on-One with Expert Flyer. I'm your host, Lisa Caslan, and today we have Ross Atkinson with us. He is the Chief Marketing Officer for a wonderful publication called Business Traveler Magazine. And as the title suggests, they cater to frequent business travelers. Thanks for joining, Ross.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Lisa. Appreciate the time and getting us set up.
Okay, very good. So we tapped Ross because we just did a series of interviews with a number of frequent business travelers. And Ross, I told you a little bit about that. And obviously, we're Expert Flyer, so we wanted to know all their inside tips and tricks, real rubber meets the road stuff. And we thought, gee, we should give Ross a call because he's in the thick of this every day. So we wanted to just kind of catch up with you and get some inside scoop from your perspective. Who's doing a good job with their frequent flyer programs, as it pertains to business travelers, and maybe some of your own tips and tricks. So why don't you talk a little bit about Business Traveler Magazine for a minute, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Well, on the audience, it is a road warrior group of individuals who know the industry, knows the ins and outs and tricks to travel and getting the best value and getting the best product when they are traveling. So it's an interesting community of travel experts that typically are flying on a national, more often on a global basis, and doing it on a very frequent time frame.
Okay, cool. So talk a little bit about, frequent flyer. When you're traveling all the time, you're in some sort of a frequent flyer program, and more often than not, some of these people know more about the frequent flyer programs than the airlines themselves. So, in your opinion, who do you think is really rolling out the red carpet for business travelers right now?
Oh, perfect question. I think loyalty has actually changed dramatically in the last several years with how it's calculated, who's offering what. So I actually take a different perspective on who's the best of the best. Mm-hmm. I say, well, to individuals when I'm asked, look at where your travel behavior is and how you want to actually value that program. And I'll give you a couple of great examples. There's great carriers who are national and international carriers here hosting in the U.S., such as the Americans, the Deltas, the United. I asked them to take a look. If you're on the West Coast, it sure is easy if you're flying up and down the coast to be allegiance to Alaska Airlines. So it's a great program. Mm-hmm. And, to be honest, much like the East Coast, somebody like JetBlue, both great programs. Mm-hmm. Also, those aren't limited to just domestic travel. Alaska itself, in its program, has over 15 different alliances that include, for codeshares, include a lot of international carriers. Mm-hmm. Where you can also earn miles. Mm-hmm. And then JetBlue, 41 plus some really interesting ways to redeem your miles on something like JetBlue. Very retail-oriented in addition to travel, so you can buy holiday gifts, and you can also travel domestically and internationally. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, I'd take a different perspective on valuing the loyalty program, separate from the hotels, because airlines, if I need to run up and down the East Coast on a regular basis, it's probably going to be on somebody, especially if I'm in New York or Boston, somebody non to the legacy carriers. Okay. And then I think the international front poses a totally different question. Mm-hmm. I myself, like to have a little bit of leniency in one of the programs that, say, an Avios has. Again, very, very large program, a lot of good benefits, and it's one world driven, so I can actually reach out to the Americans of the world and actually use the benefits across all One World customers, or members, excuse me.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So when you fly yourself, is there anything in particular that you do to maximize your chances of getting an upgrade, or just, in general, how do you make your flying experience better?
I typically try to avoid the premium days where people are shopping. So, the Monday morning business rush is pretty unlikely. That it's a highly competitive market to get upgrades. I try to travel off-peak where those occur. It gives me a little bit better chance. And I also don't mind flying through the non-traditional hubs of several of the airlines. So I don't even mind spending a little more time in the airline or in the airplane or in the airport because that's very productive time for me. It's actually where I get to see what's happening out in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, direct is always nice, but there's a lot of different tricks to actually looking at how to move to the front of the plane. And to be honest, some of the premium economy products right now are fantastic for the mid-length flights.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing wrong with them. They're often equated to some of the previous business class topics or products. So, it's a matter of taste, but you can also get a good night's sleep in premium economy on an overnight from the West Coast. So, it's a flavor of the product, the timing, and looking at the demand and try to actually fly when it's a bit off peak, if you will, for the business travel at hand.
Okay. So what kind of tools do you use? Do you use third-party apps? Do you go to Google Flights? What kind of help do you get from technology?
Well, there's an arsenal of travel technology in your hand when you're actually on the ground or in the air. So a couple of ones that I actually use frequently, whether I'm even just picking somebody up at the airport or I'm actually flying somewhere, is flight stats. It's always good to know where and when that plane is coming in, the plane before any kind of delays. That's a first conduit, I think a first conduit of where the content's actually distributed to the actual traveler. So I think that's probably one of the good ones. If you're in the air and you're making a connection, there's really easy capability to actually watch your health and wellness. There's things like Grab. So I'm connecting to an airport. Grab is an app that lets me pre-order my food, run past the actual restaurant, grab the food, and move on.
In the airport?
Correct.
Oh,
so
that's
no
great.
standing in lines.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah,
love that.
Avoiding the lines. And, of course, getting access to the lounge, depending on if it's a credit card or depending on the class of service you're using, they typically have good food, healthy options. So I think being part of the lounge network is also pretty key.
I'm glad that you mentioned the lounge thing because it came up a couple of times in our interviews, and I think there's two schools of thought on that. Some folks, even though they've accrued decent status, they don't elect to pay the extra yearly fee. They think it's smarter to just pay the $30 or whatever per, I guess, travel experience. What do you think? Is there any benefit either way?
I'm tending to lean with that comment, and here's why. Because I'm somebody who flies different airlines and go for the convenience of travel versus accumulating an extensive loyalty with a single supplier. It makes no sense for me to just belong to their lounge. I'd rather pay individual fees and use other lounges like Priority Pass or other lounges like even Centurion has their different access to different lounges. So it gives me a broader selection versus being only tied to one single airline with one single lounge.
Okay.
So I'm a fan of paying the fee for the day. Good
advice. All right. So I wanted to ask you about any trends that you're seeing percolating, but now's the time of year that some hardcore mileage folks are planning their mileage runs, their end of year mileage runs. Any comments on that? I think you've mentioned before that you've been guilty of doing this yourself. Any pros, cons, or changes relative to that, or any tips for doing it better?
I think if you're approaching October, you're starting to look at how many segments you need to qualify for the next level, how many miles to qualify for the next level. So I'm a big fan. If you can sneak a couple of short trips in to actually get to your status quicker versus waiting till the very end of the year where you're hammering through some serious flights for December.
Right.
Now's the time to actually look at where you want to end up at the end of the year as far as your status, and start planning ahead to get some of those trips in to get to that next level.
Yeah.
And I think it's important if you're a road warrior to actually maintain that level.
Yeah.
it does have its benefits.
Yeah, yeah, it's real. It's real. All right. Any trends that you want to give us a little preview of, or something that we may not be on our radar, but it's on yours, and we should look out for that might affect business travel.
I myself am a very large fan of the stopover. There's about a dozen airlines that now do it, covering Asia, parts of Europe, Middle East. So if you're traveling the globe, what a great way to actually add a couple of extra days on your trip and see a part of the world you might not have ever seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Coming, and simply said, I'll give you a great example. I've got a trip coming up in a couple weeks here in September, flying over to Europe. Rather than going direct business
mm-hmm.
class, about $3,500, I'm actually going to go through Iceland business class, about $1,000 less.
Wow.
And spend 3 days in Iceland, pick up the Blue Lagoon. They have fantastic food. So, it's one that I've done before, and I really enjoy it.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
why not grab a couple extra days on a stopover?
Okay. So is there a specific way that you need to book that? Is there anything that we need to know relative to that, or it's pretty straightforward?
Great question. Every airline is different. So, for example, on Iceland, it's right on their website. You can actually just book a stopover, and it allows you to go through the booking process, much like a multi-leg.
Okay.
However, some sites like Turkish, it's a little bit more tricky, and you typically have to call somebody and get an agent involved. So it's not actually online. So depending on the carrier, you may don't get frustrated. Pick up the phone and call them because they probably have the programs and book directly, even though you might be accustomed to booking online.
Yeah.
Call them. It's worth the extra couple days.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it's funny. I was looking to do that myself, and I got really confused and couldn't understand how to do it. So that's really good advice. I'm sure there's other people that have the same issue. Okay, so listen, we're going to pick up a copy of Business Traveler, and we're going to bone up on your next issue, and I look forward to having you back soon, and I want to hear about your trip.
Great. Thank you very much. I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay, Russ, thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.